Hi, everybody, whatever time zone it is for you. Good night from Singapore. My name is Swan, and I'll be talking a little bit about a study I did with some of my teammates at the National University of Singapore School of Public Health. We did a study on understanding knowledge, attitudes, perceptions, and behaviors around COVID-19 in Singapore using focus group discussions conducted via WhatsApp. So as you all know, COVID-19 has sprung forth a grand global infodemic, and we've seen many new dynamics emerge in how the public access, understand, interact with, share, and trust health and outbreak-related information. So we're contending with known players, particularly mainstream media and government and intergovernmental organization news, but we're also looking at much information coming from newly important and very pervasive players, particularly social media like WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter. I live in Singapore, so does Joanne, and we have the second highest rate of internet penetration in Southeast Asia and 4.8 million internet users out of our 5.6 million population. Also, 91% of the population uses smartphones, and most of this country uses WhatsApp to communicate, whether in groups, or individually, for personal or professional reasons. So for these reasons, and against this backdrop, my team and I aimed to explore Singapore residents' knowledge, attitudes, perceptions, and behaviors around COVID-19 as shaped by different information sources. So we had two key objectives. One was to investigate the propagation of information and misinformation during the pandemic and how this shapes people's knowledge, attitudes, perceptions, and behaviors. And the second was also to explore the feasibility, acceptability, and rigor of collecting focus group-based qualitative data using a common, trusted, free-to-download, free-to-use mobile messaging app. So a little look at what we did. We recruited in March 2020 using a mini e-flyer with a QR code and a web link to make it easy for people to sign up. We distributed this flyer on Facebook and also via the research team's personal and professional networks to get some people on board. Our inclusion criteria were that all our participants had to be Singapore citizens or permanent residents, adults, and users of WhatsApp. People were incentivized to participate with a $50 participation voucher, which they could choose to either use for groceries or for rideshare. And interested individuals completed a standardized online form asking for their demographic information and time and data availability for discussions. So logistically, here's what happened with the data collection. We collected data over a 3-week period from end March to early April, and we conducted 8 focus groups using WhatsApp. Each focus group had 8 participants, and we conducted these groups over 5 consecutive days. Each group was facilitated by a member of the research team. All of us are trained qualitative researchers, and we had at least one other team member observing at all times, looking at conversation flow, topics, different themes, and group dynamics. At the same time, we were doing real-time field note-taking in a separate chat room, running concurrently alongside the focus group discussions. All focus groups were conducted in English, and participants were encouraged to share information found in other languages. And the main languages in Singapore, aside from English, are Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. So we age stratified the groups and randomly allocated participants into groups with consideration of different demographic categories. We combined synchronous and asynchronous discussions, meaning some discussions were 1 hour and designated at a certain time, and some were you could participate across 8 hours throughout the day, depending on your convenience. Our key themes were knowledge, perceptions, attitudes, and understandings of the pandemic, news and government-sourced information, lay health beliefs, misinformation and fake news, and outbreak preparedness and hysteria. We also used prompts, including news articles and government information and examples of misinformation and fake news. So pre-discussion, we ensured confidentiality, ensured that we enforced ground rules, and we made sure that all our data was secure based on end-to-end encryption of chats, and all transcripts and media were downloaded and password protected. We analyzed everything in vivo, and here are some preliminary findings. So we found overall high reported levels of trust in government information sources, and this was related to trust in institutions and authority broadly. There were varied perceptions of trust and confidence in mass media, with more suspicion around some news outlets and greater trust in others. We found particular differences by age and education levels here, which I can elaborate further on in the Q&A. We also found high trust and reliance in pandemic-related information shared by family and friends via social media and messaging, but more fact-checking and skepticism among younger people. We also found very different attitudes around socially acceptable behaviors during the pandemic, such as panic buying and adhering to norms like wearing masks. The strengths of this method were virtually no data collection costs and great ease of data collection. And because we were using a pervasive app, we were able to reach participants of all walks of life. Methodologically, we were collecting data as new policies and pandemic control measures were being implemented, so we could get real-time responses and reactions from people as they were happening. Also, having two kinds of data, textual and media, were helpful in showing what participants meant and gave us more insights rather than just text data alone. Okay, so a few practical challenges to our study. Again, asynchronous sessions. We did these 8 hours a day with different prompts throughout the day, and people were able to respond as they wished, whenever they wished, as per their convenience, which made it very nice for them. But it was very difficult to keep track of flow and of themes over the course of the day, and people did get very tired, as did the facilitators. The synchronous sessions were an hour long with prompts to get the conversation going, and at the end of the hour, we would wrap up. This was fantastic for some participants who had the 1 hour fully committed to chat with us, and not so much for others, especially those who had children or grandchildren to care for that may have impacted the ways that they could share and the time that they could spend with us. Methodologically, it was really difficult for facilitators to nudge quieter participants in an online space, and it was also very difficult to encourage dominant participants to share space because in a chat room, people can ignore you. We also found it challenging as facilitators to manage the alternating rapid and slow pace of discussion, and it was often difficult to keep up because the participants would chat very excitedly and sort of get carried away, and bringing them back to theme was often quite challenging. It was also challenging to maintain and establish participant rapport online, especially over the course of 5 days, which is a very long, sustained period of time to collect data. And we had to develop very quickly different methods to engage with different age groups. For example, the younger participants responded much better to a lighter tone of conversation, whereas the older participants responded much better to more jocular use of Singlish, for example. And we had to definitely change the ways we ran groups based on how the participants themselves were interacting with each other. So the next steps where we needed to take our thematic analyses further. We have already done some and have some nice results, but we'd like to take the analysis a little bit deeper, which is what we are working on at the moment. For academic dissemination purposes, we will be writing up several manuscripts for peer-reviewed publication. And for public dissemination, which is really important in our context, we're thinking of writing an op-ed grounded in our key findings for publication in a mainstream media outlet, probably a major newspaper. And that's all I've got. Thanks very much, and looking forward to your questions.